Good evening. Thank you all for being here with us this evening. My name is Melissa Giller. I'm the Director of Programs for the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation. If I could ask each of you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. A handful of years ago, I was on a team here at the Reagan Foundation to help devise a new brand identity for the Foundation's website. The marketing company spent weeks and a lot of money interviewing key people at the Reagan administration, as well as Reagan Foundation board members and staff, to come up with one or two keywords that defined President Reagan. Not surprisingly, the company came up with things we already knew. That President Reagan was optimistic, that he never gave up fighting for what he believed in. Does ending communism ring a bell? That he was a true leader and that he fully believed in the American dream. Well, all of those words and those beliefs, they also apply to our speaker here with us this evening. This is a man who never gave up his dream of freedom, no matter what the circumstances. This is a man who survived 2 Khmer Rouge death sentences and slave labor camps, working 18 hours a day on just 1 meal a day. And he never gave up hope. This is a man who had to say goodbye to his family and his friends and find a way to escape to Thailand, 500 miles away, which he traveled mainly by pedaling a bicycle under the constant threat of capture and death. And he never gave up hope. This is a man who, when finally making it to Thailand, was put in a jail cell and later a refugee camp. And he never gave up hope. And because he never gave up hope, this is a man who later served our nation's 41st president, George H.W. Bush, as a deputy assistant, and who later served our 43rd president, George W. Bush, as a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. As he wrote in his book, "I had survived a brutal year of starvation, exhaustion, fear, horror, and terror, but my future was full of promise and innumerable opportunities for a successful life. I looked forward to the challenges of a great society which guaranteed freedom and peace to all people of goodwill." Over the past 10 years I have worked at the Reagan Foundation, I have been fortunate to meet extraordinary people with extraordinary stories. I now count Ambassador Siv among this remarkable list. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor to welcome to the stage Ambassador Siv.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for the kind introduction. I'm delighted to be back in Golden State. Each time I'm here, I say to myself, I'll be back. There's an old saying in Ventura County that behind a good Cambodian, there's a great Texan. And there's my wife, Martha. Melissa, thank you for helping organize this event, and also I want to express my gratitude to the Reagan Library Foundation for supporting this effort, and I recognize my old friend Colonel Lake, who has played a key role in this organization. There's Colonel Lake, former Air Force colonel. Today is a very special day in the Reagan legacy because in 2003, the USS Ronald Reagan was commissioned by the US Navy. Martha and I had been privileged to participate in one US Navy aircraft carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush, but you cannot imagine the awesome size of the aircraft carrier. It's really represents the symbol of power, of strength, and also the defense of freedom. We are here to celebrate the greatest strength of America, that is ethnic diversity, because this is what we call the Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. I was at the White House working for President Bush when he decided to extend the usual weekly celebration to 1 month. It was in May 1990. I was there, but I cannot confirm or deny that I had anything to do with that. We are going to take a little journey, what I call the golden journey, and Diana would probably start with the first slide. We are going to travel back to Cambodia. It's about 16 hours from LAX. And then we're going to go back in time about 50 years because I want to share with you my story. It's my story, but it's also your story. It's our story. It's an American story. So this is what I call the golden journey. And the title of this presentation is called From the Killing Fields to the White House, because I was fortunate enough to make it from the killing fields to the White House in 13 years. We are going to go straight to where I was born, and that is about 1 less than a mile from the airport. And if I make these things work, this works. But first of all, Melissa mentioned a little bit about the optimism of Ronald Reagan, and I sort of heard this quote, and this is something that sort of was instilled in me as well, because he said, there is no limit to what a man can do or where he can go if he doesn't mind who gets the credit. And when I've heard that, I thought this is something that probably I can relate to very easily, because here I was traveling from the killing fields to the United States, to an orchard in Connecticut, and on to the White House. This is where I was born. It's about less than a mile from the airport. So when we go to Cambodia, we all go to my village. We land at my village. And I was born 3 years after World War II, and Cambodia was still under the French colony, so I grew up speaking French. I learned everything in French. French was my second language. And I didn't know anything about a non-French world, because everything that was told to us was just France. France was the mother country until 1953, when I heard that the Vice President of the United States and Mrs. Nixon came to visit. I was on first grade only. And I heard that this is a very, very strong country so far away, even farther than France. My mother told me when I was a child to never give up hope, no matter what happens. And that was with me all along when I was growing up, when I was going through very, very difficult circumstances, when I was trying to cross the jungle of Cambodia to Thailand, and when I was coming to the United States. And hope helped me move all the way to the White House. The Cambodian educational system was based on the French, so we had the primary education of 6 years, and when I passed the primary education in 1959 at 11, my mother took me to see Angkor. Angkor is a former capital of Cambodia, and this is Angkor Wat, the major temple there, built in the 12th century. And it's currently the largest religious temple in the world, religious monument in the world. And you see the banyan tree right here. When you go to Angkor Wat, the first tree on the left, that's where my mother and I had a picnic in 1959. So each time Martha and I go to Cambodia, we go to that tree to pay our respects. My father passed away in 1957 when I was 9 years old. And my mother worked very hard to bring me up. She struggled, she worked in a various menial jobs to send me to the best school in the kingdom. This is like the Phillips and Dover of Cambodia, Sisawat High School. Some years ago, I went back to that high school, and the principal on the left took me to see my classroom. And this is where I sat in 1960s. I sat in that classroom, and the color is still the same. So I told the students I was there among you. In my years, I look around the room. I think many of us probably belong to the same generation. In my generation, there was nothing but books, books, and books. So I spent a lot of time in in the libraries, and I happened to be married to a librarian. So libraries really were the foundation of my knowledge and my insatiable thirst to know about the outside world. This is the inscription at the National Library of Cambodia, Force, Ties for a Time, Ideas Bind Forever. And that is the epigraph of my memoir, Golden Bones. In 1969, I became a flight attendant after I left high school, and I flew all over Asia. I went to China for the first time, and I saw the country at the peak of the Cultural Revolution. I had no idea that revolution would reach my homeland within a few years. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese that had occupied the eastern part of Cambodia broke out and began to attack the Cambodian government. The Cambodian army was very small, very ill-equipped, very ill-trained, about 35,000 soldiers, and the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese numbered to about 60,000. So within a few weeks, they were coming close to within artillery shell of the capital. I saw a lot of death and destruction. I saw children, women, innocent people being killed by these rockets. I said I would try to do something to help. So I went to work for CARE, which is a relief organization. We help caring for about 500,000 refugees who had fled the war-torn countryside to seek safety and shelter in cities and in the capital. On April 10, 1975, President Ford gave a joint session of Congress address, and I listened to the address on Voice of America. He said, for this administration, the options on South Vietnam and Cambodia are few, and the time is very short. When I heard that, my heart sank, because I knew the United States was going to pull out of Cambodia. 2 days later, the U.S. Embassy came to my office and told me that I ought to be at the embassy within 1 hour if I wanted to be airlifted out of Cambodia. There is no other way. The airport was closed. I had a meeting with the governor of a province where we used to care for some 3,000 refugees, and I thought that by going to the meeting, I would be able to save the lives of those refugees. So I decided to go. When I finished, I went to the embassy, and I was told that the last helicopter had taken off 30 minutes before. So I missed the US helicopter by 30 minutes. 5 days later, the Khmer Rouge came, and they turned Cambodia upside down. Suddenly, Cambodia became a land of soaked with blood and tears. My mother, who knew I was in danger, not only that I was in danger, but I would put everybody in danger, because I wore glasses. Wearing glasses was a sign of being educated. The Khmer Rouge were killing intellectuals, the merchants, the businessmen, the military people, government officials, teachers, nurses, doctors. Everybody who had not been with them during their so-called revolution was a prime target. And I fell into all those categories. I spoke French, I spoke English, I worked for an American organization. So my mother, who had been telling me, no matter what happens, never give up hope, gave me her scarf, her wedding ring, and her bag full of rice. And she said, run, no matter what happens, never give up hope. So I rode a bicycle from the southeastern part of Cambodia to the northwestern part. Vietnam had fallen 2 weeks after Cambodia. So my only hope was Thailand. And it was 500 miles away. I used fake passes and false excuses to get through the Khmer Rouge checkpoints. But I was captured near the Thai border. Fortunately, a truck driver whom I had met a few days before saved my life. He told the Khmer Rouge that I was an innocent person, that I was wandering around looking for my family. For the following year, I spent time working in this huge labor camp. Cambodia was turned into a huge, it was totally deserted, just like in these pictures. Cambodia was a huge forced labor camp. The only solution or answer to a mistake was death penalty. They would kill anybody who made a mistake. So I pretended to be deaf, dumb, and mute. I didn't hear anything. I couldn't see of anything. I couldn't speak of anything. Every night when I went to sleep, after 18 hours of hard labor, after only one bowl of rancid soup, I never knew if I would be alive the following day. When I woke up, I realized I was still alive, still in Cambodia. I said I would make it to Thailand and to freedom. In January 1976, the Khmer Rouge were looking for a crane operator. So I raised my hand. I never been in a crane in my life. But I knew that the job would take me closer to Thailand, because the Khmer Rouge were going to use a crane to pick up timber, and we would transport the timber back to the nearest town, and the timber was found along the Thai border. And that would increase my chance to make it to Thailand. I began to study the land area and found out that the shortest distance to Thailand was somewhere between the timber pickup point and the nearest village. On February the 13th, 1976, I was alone at the back of the timber truck. I said, now or never. And I decided to take a leap of faith. I couldn't jump to the left because the Khmer Rouge would have seen me. The driver would have seen me. If I jumped to the right, the Khmer Rouge soldier would have seen me. And he had an AK-47 on the ready all the time. So what I did, I crawled on top of the timber all the way to the back, and then I just dropped myself behind the truck. During the Khmer Rouge years, Khmer Rouge period, I realized that the best time for me to survive is to never give up hope. But the night was dark, and I knew that the sun will rise in the morning. So that message from my mother rang with me all the time. I mentioned a moment ago that February the 13th was my last day in Cambodia, and somehow I knew it was my last day in Cambodia. So I took a bath under this tamarind tree near the 12th century temple. Temples in Cambodia were built with a moat surrounding it, so the moat was full of water. And fast forward, when I jumped off that truck, I was caught on a piece of lumber. And I was dragged for a few hundred yards before I was flung off. Then I began to run, to walk, to crawl, to swim for 3 days, having nothing to eat. I fell in a booby trap, which is a deep hole full of punchy sticks, very sharp bamboo sticks. These were supposed to catch the unlucky victims at the heart or the stomach. But I'm very tall for a Cambodian, so they hit me on my legs. I was severely wounded, but I was able to pull myself out and continue to limp along until I got to Thailand. That's how I look when I arrive in Thailand. On the left, Cambodia, just like Thailand and many Asian countries, are Buddhist societies. So Buddhists believe that if you become a monk, for males, you become a monk, you make merits, you earn deeds, and you can dedicate those deeds and those merits to your loved ones. And I did that. I did that for my mother. I was transferred from the jail to a refugee camp where there was another 3,000 refugee families living in an area the size of a soccer field. It was hot, filthy, humid. Most of them suffered severe mental depression. They sat around all day feeling sorry about the past and worrying about the future. I thought I would do something to help them out, so I organized English classes. It was a win-win situation. Many of them were going to an English-speaking countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, the United States. So they were able to get some English. At the same time, they were able to get their minds off the worries and the sorrows. On June 4th, 1976, I arrived in Wallingford, Connecticut, with my mother's scarf, an empty rice bag, and $2. I was sick and tired, but I was full of hope. I want to be on my own feet. I want to adapt. I want to adapt to America so that America would adopt me. In French, it sounds even better. S'adapter et se faire adopter. So I did everything. My first job was picking apples. I picked a lot of apples. I ate a lot of apples, enough to last for a lifetime. Then I went to work for an ice cream store. Friendly's ice cream. I had known only 3 flavors in Cambodia. At Friendly's, there are like 20 flavors, and then they had the flavors of the month, so I had to memorize all those flavors. I never seen a hamburger in my life, and suddenly I was hearing rare, medium rare. I was holding the lettuce, and the trainer said, "Hold the lettuce." I didn't understand what she was saying. Later on, I realized that she didn't want me to put the lettuce on the hamburger. It was very tough. But the most confusing part was at the cash register. The dimes were smaller, but worth more than nickels. Did you ever notice that? I said, this is very difficult. I have to move on. My next stop was New York, New York. I stood at the street corner of Manhattan and I saw these yellow cabs, at that time the checkers, coming down with signs at the back. Drivers wanted. So I picked up the phone and called. They asked me to go and take a test. It's all about direction. How do you get from the Waldorf Astoria to the United Nations? I had no idea where these places were, much less how to get from one to another. So I just checked the boxes. At the end, I came to the examiner. I handed him the sheet. He looked at the boxes. He frowned. He looked at me from head to toe. He shook his head. He sighed, and he said, "You passed." So I became a taxi driver. In 1977, you didn't need to have any knowledge of where you were going. To be a taxi driver, you only need strong horn and good brakes. And New Yorkers sometimes amaze me because they could communicate in sign language. But I continued to do everything that came my way to the best of my ability. I applied to a lot of graduate schools. They all turned me down because I had no transcript, except Columbia. The dean called me up and asked me to go and see him. And I prepared. You know, when you go for an interview, you try to prepare for all kinds of questions. But he asked me one question that I didn't know how to answer. He said, "Why do you want to spend 2 more years learning everything you already knew?" So I was struggling for a few seconds, a few minutes, before I came with an answer I thought would be acceptable. I said I was going to spend the rest of my life here, so it's important for me to find to have an American education, as opposed to the French education I had in Cambodia. He smiled, he shook my hand, he said, "Thanks for coming, we will call you." That's an answer you don't want to hear when you go for an interview. Don't call us, we will call you. But the following morning I got a call from another dean. He said that we found a scholarship for you, and we would like you to start this semester, and you can come next week for the orientation. So there I was on my way to an Ivy League school. And all these years, I never forgot what my mother told me. Never give up hope. After Columbia, I spent some time working in Wall Street and a few other places. I met Martha already by that time. And 1988, suddenly there was an election. I arrived in the United States in '76 when there was an election. And I looked at the TV with my host family. They told me I didn't understand what was going on. I saw these people wearing funny hats, jumping up and down the chair, screaming, shouting, yelling. And they told me that these are delegates. They are at a convention. They are going to choose 2 nominees, and we are going to elect one of the 2 nominees. And they turned to me, they said, "Sichan, if you wanted to understand this country, you should get involved." So my chance to get involved was 1988. There was an election between the Vice President of the United States, George H.W. Bush, and the Governor of Massachusetts. Martha and I were living in New York, so I decided to volunteer in the Bush campaign. When Bush got elected, he asked me to go and work for him at the White House. I forgot to show you some pictures here. This is one of my classes at the refugee camp, and this is one of my favorite pictures. This is very stylish, in 1977. In the 80s, we were lucky enough to be invited to a few functions where we met President Reagan and Mrs. Reagan for the first time. But the highlight was probably July 13, 1988, when I was invited to an event in the Rose Garden where President Reagan, signed a proclamation for Captive Nations Week. This is an event in honor of all the countries that had fallen to communism. So that was the first time I met Vice President Bush. And little did I know that a few months later, I would be working for him. President Bush was elected, and there he was sworn in. And there's me at the White House. And I have a colleague, former colleague, Kathy Russ, used to work with me at the White House. Kathy, remember this? Room 128, you were in the picture, but I don't know where you were sitting. The first few years of the Bush administration, there was a lot of changes. I mean, the Cold War ended thanks to President Reagan with his steadfast position against communism. And the Soviet Union fell apart, Eastern Europe became free, Germany became united. For somebody like me, who had ran across the jungles of Cambodia 13 years before, and now working for the President of the United States, seeing history taking shape in front of my eyes, that was quite overwhelming. And that was a great tribute to America, to President George H.W. Bush, that I was able to make it from the killing fields to the White House in 13 years. In 1992, we decided to send a delegation to Cambodia. The United States had played a key role in finding peace agreement for Cambodia. It took us 2 years to finally agree on a framework. And I was sitting behind Secretary James Baker in Paris. When he signed the peace agreement, he turned around, he gave me the pen. So we decided to send a delegation to see how the preparation on the ground was being taking place before the United Nations sent the largest peacekeeping operation, some 22,000 personnel. I went to the meetings with my colleagues, and after that I was able to go to Angkor Wat. That's where I was praying right there on the left. Then I went to visit my father's village. The villager knew that I was a survivor of the killing fields, that I was now working for the President of the United States. They said to me, "You are truly a person of golden bones," because Cambodians refer to somebody who is very blessed, very lucky, a person of golden bones. When President Bush left the White House, I returned to the private sector. When George W. Bush got elected, he asked me to become a U.S. ambassador to the UN. The United Nations is a very interesting place because to us, to the United States, we have a triple responsibilities. We co-founded the United Nations here in the Golden State in San Francisco. We play host to the UN. New York is the world's largest diplomatic community, and we are the largest benefactor to many United Nations humanitarian assistance programs. You cite everything from cradle to coffin, from children to aging, and everything in between. HIV, AIDS, health, food, human rights, women, we are there at the top. So for an American ambassador, especially for somebody like me, it was quite overwhelming to walk to the United Nations as an American ambassador. Each time I went in, my colleagues from 191 countries looked at me. Through me, they saw you. They saw America. They saw her promise, her opportunity. They wanted to hear what I had to say. When I said, on behalf of the President and people of the United States, that was my proudest moment. In 2004, Martha and I were in Lexington, Kentucky, not for the Kentucky Derby, but for a wedding. I got a call from my colleagues at the State Department. They said that the King of Cambodia just abdicated, and we want you to go to Cambodia to represent the United States. And I said, when do you want me to leave? They said, tomorrow. So we went back to Washington. I got on the plane to New York and then left for Cambodia. This is a very interesting scene in the Royal Palace during the coronation. You will notice that all the men and women wore blue, what they call a samput, that is the lower garment. Because this is Friday and the colors in the palace change every day. When you see blue, you know that it's Friday. Sunday is red, and Monday is orange. In 2005, Martha and I decided that we would leave the East Coast and return to Martha's home state of Texas. But we had another trip to Cambodia. The U.S. Embassy, what they call the post-9/11 U.S. Embassy, was being dedicated. And we were invited to participate in the dedication. So the following day, I introduced Martha to the new king. And I already started to write my memo after Martha gave me a laptop, which was a method for me to put pen to paper. But you know, for 30 years, when I arrived in America in 76 until 06, each time I introduced myself, people asked me, when are you going to write a book? I was very reluctant from the beginning because I knew I had to go through a lot of painful memory. But as I continued to travel around the United States and around the world, the questions persisted. When are you going to write a book? So after we moved to Texas, Martha gave me a laptop and I got to work. But I wanted to close the loop. I wanted to find out what happened to the truck driver who saved my life not once but twice. The first time in June '75 and the second time in September. I didn't have my glasses, so I was driving a truck and I went off the road. I couldn't see. And damaging a truck was damaging state property, and it carried death sentence. So that was my second death sentence. Somehow he was able to convince the Khmer Rouge that it was a minor accident. It would take a few minutes to repair it. So in June '06, we were invited by the Thai government to the 60th anniversary of the King of Thailand, with all the royal barge procession right on the left, and we decided to go to Cambodia. We wanted to find the truck drivers, or at least what happened to him. It took us 2 days before we find 2 of his sisters and then 1 of his nieces there. And I felt that I had closed the loop. The King Father and the Queen Mother, the King Father who is now 90 years old, and the Queen Mother who is eternally beautiful, invited us to have lunch with them at the palace. 1 month before the book came out, the Bush White House invited me to give a presentation at the White House, which is quite unusual because normally the White House only have people speak about policy and politics. But there I was talking about my book, but it's about America. It's an American dream story. The book came out in July, and we launched it in San Antonio, where we have our principal home. And there I was in Indianapolis. I signed 500 copies here, so I have my own Indy 500. And there's a Randolph Air Force Base that where I met Colonel Lake, and there was Santa. He said it was a perfect gift. The following year, the paperback edition came out, and then we have the Portuguese edition. This is a very interesting anecdote because the gentleman here is a mayor of a town in north of Sao Paulo, about 2 hours north of Sao Paulo, called Indaiatuba. He listened to my speech at the Bush Library. By the way, tonight I have spoken in all the Republican libraries, including all my lifetime. I've spoken twice at the Bush Library, at the Ford, at Nixon, and this is the Reagan. We save the best for the last. But Jose Onerio listened to my speech at the Reagan Library, and he went back to Brazil. He said, this story must be shared with Brazilians. So he took it upon himself to have the book translated into Portuguese in 6 months, which was a record. And then they invited us to go to Sao Paulo for a book launch. And the Brazilians, they know how to throw a party. Everybody who was somebody was there, the movie star, the designer, the artist. And I was given all kinds of awards, including the one I'm holding there, which made me the first non-Brazilian to be the recipient. Last year, the Cambodian edition came out, and a number of Cambodian community leaders, some of them are here with us from Cambodia town in Long Beach, went to participate. And also a special guest was the Foreign Minister of Colombia. She was my counterpart at the UN. She was Ambassador of Colombia, and she always wanted to go to Cambodia. So the stars and the moon aligned themselves last year when we were both invited to speak at the conference. And I took her to see Angkor, and she was able to fulfill her childhood dream. We, Martha and I, continue to interact with young people because it's important for us to make young people understand that we are very lucky, we are blessed to be in America. And this is at the Air Force Academy, thanks to Colonel Lake. And we were shown a parade and we were invited to have lunch with 4,000 cadets. Imagine 4,000 cadets eating lunch in 20 minutes. And after that, they just melted away, not a sound, which is quite amazing. I salute for the Air Force for that. And the other cadets that we've been involved is, these are the cadets of the Civil Air Patrol, which I've been a member since 1991. President George H.W. Bush said on June 22nd, 1989, that any definition of a successful life must include serving others. So suddenly I realized I had to find something, and it was the Civil Air Patrol. They were involved in search and rescue operation, in cadet programs, and in aerospace education. So these are cadets that are members of the Randolph Squadron. But another group, young people here, are what they call City Year. City Year are a program for young people up to 21 to spend 1 year of their life helping underperforming students. And they have their trademark red jacket, and I put my red boots on. Here at the City Council of San Antonio, I was invited to address the beginning class, 95 of them, and each of them was given a copy of Golden Bones that line up there. But the other fun thing for me to do is to be honorary commander of the Air Force 433rd Airlift Wing, which is the C5 unit based at Lackland. And that is another amazing experience. I was honorary commander of Colonel Lake's base, Garrison Base, right, 502, right? Yes. Oh, and then now I'm with 433. It's just incredible to interact with our military people, our servicemen and women, and that gives me a lot of honor, a lot of privilege, and a lot of pleasure. And these are my two commanders, and I always feel that each of us can do so much. But together, we can do much more. And hope is what I have. Honesty, optimism. President Reagan is the eternal optimist. That's why I can relate to him very well. Perseverance, extraordinary. And here we are, no matter what happens, never give up hope. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. That's it. I have another treat for you, special treat. And that is an 8-minute DVD that was produced by Voice of America, but it's not in English. And I can go over this. I can do the voiceover. It was produced by Voice America in Chinese because they wanted to project an American story, and that was beamed to China on July 4th. To really have an American. So Diana, let's start, and I'll share the story. Can you all see? Maybe I don't have to go down. This is a plane, a civil air patrol plane. We are doing a fire-watch mission. What we call a fire-watch mission. We are assigned. There are two airports in San Antonio. This is Stinson, which is the second oldest airport in the United States, and that's where we keep our plane. My squadron keeps our plane there. And this is how my life begins. There's San Antonio. We are doing the pre-flight planning. This is a C-182, what they call the G-1000 cockpit. Except from the book, it said when I flew in a 747 to New York, I knew I was a free man when I saw the
这是
Statue of
徐锡
Liberty.
全在自传《至尊金谷》中描述他第一次飞到美国上空时的体验。那一年，他终于逃出柬埔寨红色高棉的杀戮场，来到了向往中的自由世界。
These are Khmer Rouge soldiers. Some of them are very young, just like this guy.
政权后，为了把国家
And
变
they
成
had
一
the
个
power of
所谓
life
资
and
本主
death
义
over
丑恶的农
ordinary
业社会
citizens.
当
So
全国
refugees are
人民
fleeing countryside. This is the killing fields
200万人被
and the forced labor camp. So Cambodia became a land soaked with blood and tears.
柬埔寨成了一片浸透鲜血和眼泪的土地，我们被强制劳动，每天干18个小时的活，我几乎被累死，一天只有1顿饭，不知道还能不能活到明天。
全家16个人中，徐锡全是唯一的幸存者。
My mother's wisdom was to never give up hope, no matter what happens.
我母亲说，无论如何都不要放弃希望。我把她的格言牢记在心，让我死里逃生。
This is one of the refugee camps in Thailand. It's not the camp where I was, but a different camp. But you could see the conditions. That's the English class.
徐锡全说，自己能够幸存下来是
I was a Buddhist monk.
Golden bones。
Golden bones are the terms Cambodians
柬埔寨人用至尊筋骨来形容一个非常幸运和受到保佑的人。
同年6月，徐锡全作为难民来到了美国，口袋里只有2块美金。他打过很多苦工，开过出租车。
So my
不过
favorite
他的志
picture.
向不仅是糊口。3年后，徐锡全考进了
Columbia
美国
University.
哥伦比亚大学，随后获得
This picture was taken the week after President Reagan was shot in Washington. I was in Washington the following week.
Well, I think again one of the things about him that was so striking at the beginning was
他最突出的一点就是精力充沛，还有他的适应能力和接受能力。他总是乐意接受挑战。
1987年是徐锡全的又一次人生转折点。坚信美国民主制度的他，为老布什继任总统当义工。他凭着亲和的性格和
Then
优
escort
异的
at
才
the White
能
House.
脱颖而出。老布什入主白宫后，任命他为总统助理，负责白宫的对外关系。
I cannot say how overwhelmed I was.
This
is another excerpt.
13号，我走马上任。
On February 13, 1989, 13 years after I jumped off the truck in Cambodia, I went to work at the White
像
House.
我这样的一个人，怎么可能
That's how I was
在这么短短的时间里走过这么长的
so
一
overwhelmed.
定是运气和信念。
徐锡全非常庆幸命运对自己的眷顾，为此他每天都在这
I pray in front of my mother's scarf and the rice bag, the yellow bag, that's a rice bag, and the red, white checker, that's my mother's scarf.
和一只黄色的礼袋。
I pray in front of them every morning, every day. I'm very thankful.
我能走到今天，我很感恩。我为我的母亲和所有死于红色高棉残酷统治的亲人祈祷。
不过，在妻子玛萨的眼里，运气时好时坏，就看你怎样掌握。
I think again one makes one's own luck in a certain way. The combination.
我想，一个人的运气是由自己创造的，运气不会总是好的。不过，在机会来到的时候，他从来不会错过。
2001年底，在小布什总统执政期间，徐锡全再次担当重任，他被任命为美国驻联合国经济和社会委员会大使。2008年7月，徐锡全写
So
下
the
了
book
自
came
传
out,
《
and this is one of the book signing events.
30年后，我才决心把这段往事写下来。我迟疑了很久，我不想重返痛苦的过去。
至尊金谷
This is a
被读者
place
带来启示
across the street from the Alamo, so it was fun to
在一次
be able to
见
see
面
the
上
Alamo
读
from
者
that
凯瑟琳
ballroom.
金说
And I was really amazed at the
令人折服的是，他的语气一点儿没有怨恨，而是抓住每一次的机会去进取，去寻找自由和快乐。读了这本书后，我完全被感动、被鼓舞、被激励。
I found the book very moving and very inspirational.
我认为这本书非常感人，非常的励志。在这个国家出生的人，从来没有经历过真正的苦难。这个故事让你学会了珍惜美国的实质。
一直向往牛仔生活的徐锡全，已经在德州生活了2年。
Texas flag, if you don't
徐
recognize.
锡全还是忘不了公务员的本色。他的另一项工作是在圣安东尼奥国际机场巡警队当志愿者。负责
This is not a volunteer job, another volunteer job in San Antonio. I'm an aviation police volunteer, so I patrol the airport on foot or in car patrol cars.
现在又回到机场。如果说母亲给了徐锡全希望，那么美国则给了他机会。
I was grateful not only that I had survived. There are 3 words that are my favorite 3 English words
起希望。这句话不仅让我活了下来，
in this excerpt from the book,
正因为我
and you
生
heard
活
at the
在
end.
美国，希望加上努力，使得最遥远的梦想变成了现实。只有在美国，这一切才可能。
Only in America. Only in
美国
America.
万花筒记者莫干生、叶凡，圣安东尼奥采访报道。
Thank you. What you just heard just now in March, Governor Romney came to San Antonio, and I was asked to introduce myself and introduce him. So I said what I said to you tonight in 3 minutes.
So the ambassador has been kind enough to say he'd answer a few questions. We do ask that you raise your hand and wait for a staff member to bring a microphone to you as we are taping the speech. Right there.
Mr. Ambassador, first of all, I want to thank you for your service to our nation,
Thank
this
you.
wonderful country. My name is Bernard, and I am a Cambodian American as well. I have similar experience during the killing fields. When I was about 8 or 9 years old as a young boy, I went through that political genocide, starvations, and forced manual labor. As a result, I've lost my grandparents, my parents, younger sister, and cousin to execution. And my cousin was also tortured because he was a military intelligence officer. In '79, when there was an invasion, I managed to walk through minefield and, snake-infested swamp to the refugee camp. And with the grace of the American people in this nation, I was given an opportunity to settle in America, and out of all places in the Deep South. And I have to tell you, I finally lost my southern accent, but I can still fake it once in a while. Similar to your experience when I first came to America, one thing, the biggest shock I had was seeing a high school student eating hamburger and drinking Coke. I was like, yay! But what ironic is that 6 months later, I was doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as the story goes on for me, I finally graduated. It's hard for me because I encountered culture shock and language barrier as well. But with those powerful words that you listen there, one of which is perseverance and determination, I was able to graduate from high school with multiple achievement awards as well. And finally moved to California. Now here's interesting, because there's so many life lost, I believe close to 2 million, it depends who or what statistic you're looking at. I wanted to do something that I can save people's life because I feel guilty in a sense, even though I was a kid and I was not responsible for that act of horror. Nonetheless, I feel responsible. So I wanted to choose something that I can do this, in a profession that I can save life. And as I was walking on East Los Angeles College campus one day, I saw this wonderful video spoken by the late President Ronald Reagan, giving credit to a group of therapists called the respiratory therapists in helping saving his life because during his assassination attempt. And 20 years later, I stand before you, a proud respiratory care practitioner. I've gone.
Bravo! Congratulations.
Yes, I've gone to work from burn unit to trauma center, and currently I manage premature burn babies in a newborn intensive care unit as well. And I teach part-time at a community college. But one thing that I'm proud of most is as I'm talking to you and to everyone here is that I'm also a disaster healthcare volunteer. I belong to the Los Angeles County Surge Unit. So in the event that at any time in the future, if you have man-made disaster or a natural disaster, I will be there to make sure that I do my part in terms of my community service, something that I've done for 25 years in terms of helping. So I want to thank you. And the question I have for you is that since you have been well-versed, submerged in the national and international affairs, what do you think the future for Cambodia is, or will be economically, financially, politically, constitutionally?
Thank you for your question. I'm sorry about your loss, and I congratulate you for your success. And I can understand how you relate to my story because you came through the whole experience. When Martha and I we try to go to Cambodia once a year, and when we go to Cambodia, we are not staying in the Phnom Penh or Siem Reap. We are there for a few days just to see friends, but we go to the villages. We want to interact with the villagers, with the young people. And I recently, in our last trip, I spoke at the University of Cambodia, and I was given an honorary doctorate, which is nice. I didn't have to write a thesis. Yeah, I was became a doctor overnight. But the young people, they care more about the future. They are very proud of the culture, about the civilization. And we speak the same language. We speak the same language in the sense that we want to build a foundation for the future. Cambodia is still going through a lot of problems. There are a lot of domestic problems, corruption, injustice, and so on and so forth. But somehow there has been some stability, and that is good in a sense. And I think everybody there is trying very hard to make the country even more stable and on a good path to democracy. They are running for the UN Security Council seat this year, and I feel that they should deserve the seat on the council because they've been a member of the UN since 1955, but they've never been on the council. And they have been involved in the peacekeeping operation, and they have sent about 1,000 peacekeeping personnel to everywhere, from Lebanon to Sudan and so on. So they are trying very hard to become a good global citizen. And if they become a member of the UN Security Council, they will have an obligation to work even more for the justice, for the equality, to fight corruption and so on and so forth. So I think it's on the right track. And as you know, they have had an election every 5 years. So we'll see what the future holds.
I think there was a question right over there.
Yes, I was just curious. You said you were able to track down family members of the truck driver who had saved your life twice. I was just wondering what had happened to him. What were you able to find out more about him from his family members? Thank you, Mr.
Yes, we did find out from the sister, one of the sisters, the younger one. She told us that he died in a bus accident a few years earlier, and his wife died a few years later. And the children went all in different directions. So Martha and I left something for them, for the sisters to carry on. But he passed away. Yeah.
We had a question, no? Another one? Did you still have a question? No, his hand was up earlier. No, any other questions right here?
Ambassador Siv, thank you very much. I was an Army officer. It was 1974. I was an escort for 3 Cambodian Army officers at Fort Benning. They had limited English. I didn't speak Cambodian, but we spoke French together, and I became very good friends with them. They went through airborne school, infantry officers, basic. And when they left, I corresponded with them for some months, like the end of 1974 and into 1975. But after April 1975, I never heard from them again. And I always feared that they had died as the Khmer Rouge took over. And I remember that period very well, and my question is, how did a gang of thugs like the Khmer Rouge seize power so quickly and just extend such a murderous reign for decades?
First, let me ask you, do you remember the name of your fellow officers from Cambodia? Because I have some friends who went to Fort Benning around that time.
One was Hul Ki Chung.
No, I don't know. Yeah.
I remember trying to explain the Civil War to him in French, and we're driving through the southern states and took him to Panama City for 4th of July weekend, and just, I liked those guys a lot, and it was kind of very poignant.
Were they airborne?
They went through infantry officers basic, and then we were in airborne school together.
Yeah, we have a good friend who was trained at Fort Benning also, and he later became a defense minister, and he's still alive. I don't know whether that's the one, but it's not the name that you mentioned. The Khmer Rouge, that is always a difficult question to answer, because we just do not know how a group of people, a small group of people who were trained in French schools in the 50s, could come to power and turn Cambodia into such a tragic land. They were all married by ideology, and they went to France on government scholarship. They joined the French socialist movements. They failed their examination, so the government cut their scholarship. And when they went back to Cambodia, they were outcasts, because Cambodia was a prosperous country, peaceful, not rich but not poor either. Finally, they banded together and they went into the jungle. It's probably the simple explanation would be that they thought that they could do it, take control of a very educated population, but they went so far as to eliminate everyone that could be helping building the country, and they end up with total ignorant people. And I was there for a year, and I didn't know where they came from. They never saw a railroad track in their life. They thought it was a long ladder. And I couldn't laugh, because if I laugh, I would have been killed on the spot. So it was just so hard to explain. It's sort of something that happened once every 1,000 years in human history. And unfortunately, it happened to Cambodia, to the Cambodian people, who are very gentle people. Yeah.
I want to thank you for coming here
Thank you.
tonight. Your speech was fantastic. Thank you.
Martha, some friends of ours ordered some yellow roses of Texas. And we want to give it to the staff of the Reagan Library. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The ambassador has been kind enough to say he'd sign some books and stay. So what we're going to do is, if you have a book, we're going to line you up right here to your right. If you don't have a book but want one, we're going to sell them right there in the lobby. And just give us a moment to take the podium down and bring the stage fix up for you. Thank you.